Dear colleagues, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation or to send this presentation by video. Unfortunately, I am not able to participate in your workshop because I'm currently in another conference in Japan. I would like to thank especially to Osama Mustafa for allowing me to send this number of notes relating to our operations on UAVs and some of our experience on possible impacts relating to bird communities, especially in the northern part of the Antarctic Peninsula. I am Gonçalo Vieira, and I am presenting this PowerPoint together with my colleagues Gabriel Goyanes, Pedro Pina and Lourenço Bandeira. Our work in the Antarctic Peninsula relating to UAVs has started in 2013, and we have been active annually at different sites from 2013 to 2017, focusing essentially in the months of January and February. Here in this map you can see the areas where we conducted flights. These flights were done for different purposes, but essentially focusing on land cover, mapping, high-resolution digital surface model preparation or surveying, and also relating on possible effects of permafrost changes on infrastructure. That's why we have also mapped several areas of research stations. Our work has essentially focused in Barton Peninsula, the area where we have more experience, but also in Fields Peninsula, and then we have made shorter flights in Dundee Island. Gabriel Goyanes has made several flights, and also in Seymour Island, but in Cerva Cove and Doomer Island the flights were shorter. We have been using essentially two types of drones. I'm not going to go in detail about them because they are well known. The one we have used for wider areas is the SenseFly EB, the version 2, which you can see here. It's a fixed-wing aircraft. And the other one is a consumer-grade Phantom 3 Advanced, which also allow us to make very high-quality surveys. They are completely different, both in terms of usage and also in terms of the ways that we see that the birds interact with them. One of the problems, or not the problems, but one of the things that happens, as you know, is that UAVs and people, of course, generate curiosity of birds. And here you can see penguins that have approached us from far away just to see what we were doing, and in fact we were flying a UAV. My colleague is following it because this is an area also with skuas, and we were looking to see if there were interactions with skuas in the air. The photo is from Doomer Island, near the Palmer Archipelago at Yelcho Station, a Chilean station. So I will include some notes based on flights that we have made, and I will focus on skuas and also on Antarctic terns. So January, February, using the UAV fixed wing, we normally fly at around 120 meters above ground, sometimes a bit higher up, and also sometimes down to 90 meters. We have noticed that upon takeoff, even if skuas are a few hundred meters away, sometimes they follow the UAV, they just go and follow it, and in fact very close to the ground, maybe at 50 meters, a skua came very fast and she attacked the UAV. You can see the effect here on the winglet. The UAV didn't fall and there was no problem at all for the skua. We just saw that she hit him, and but nothing more happened, and in fact the UAV landed safely. We didn't notice in fact until it landed that it had been damaged. So normally they just accompany the drone, and normally after some time following it they lose their interest. But this is never the case, as I will show you. In fact, if the UAV passes closer to scarps, probably scarps which have nests, even if the vertical distance from the ground is high, I mean just below down, the horizontal distance can be smaller. And in fact, we had several SCUA attacks to UAVs in those conditions. So in fact, the SCUAs were affected. We do not really fly in areas with many SCUAs during nesting. We have in fact cases of operations that we decided not to do because there were too many SCUAs. We were there specifically for flying. For instance, we went to Palmer to do the maintenance of some of our boreholes, but and with all the permits also for flying the UAVs. But in the terrain, we found that it was not safe, and the SCUAs were in fact quite violent for us, and we didn't want to risk also the SCUAs in the air. In what concerns I will move forward. Let me see, because there is a slide which is missing here. Let me see. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I will go back and forth, and I'm sorry for this. So still relating to the SCUA behavior, we can say that the SCUA behavior is clearly modified by the UAV presence, but does the UAV has an higher impact than the human presence? Probably not, especially if it's a fixed wing UAV which poses no harm to the SCUAs. This is an example which I think it's interesting, especially for those of you who are not used to fly UAVs, and it's a flight log, and you can see how we have at these 3 moments sent special comments to the drone to make a fast climb maneuver in order to avoid SCUA attacks. So in fact, they were following the drone, but at sometimes they were really too close to the drone, and they looked like they were going to hit the drone, so we had to do fast climbs. Sometimes this happened. It's not very frequent, and in this case was a case where we were flying not very far from a SCAR. We were quite high above the ground, but then there was a slope, and this may have derived the problem. So I'm going back now to another example in Fields Peninsula, which is with a UAV, a Phantom 3. It's a quadcopter. We fly with the quadcopter much lower down, at below 60 meters above the ground. And from our experience in Fields Peninsula from last season, during 30 flights in 7 different days, no relevant interaction from SCUAs was noticed. SCUAs were many times present on the ground, normally further than 100 meters away. They were watching the drone take off, the landing, but they did not interfere at all. A couple of times they came close to the UAV during the flights, but soon they moved away, probably because they rapidly verified that it was not really a bird, and they were not really concerned. In fact, now I noticed that there is a mistake here in the presentation. Here it should say not Fields Peninsula, but in fact Sierva Cove. In Sierva Cove, the situation was different. There is a high density of SCUAs and penguins, and we found that sometimes the SCUAs were really aggressive, approaching the UAV, and we decided to abort the mission in order to not harm the SCUAs, because and also not to damage the UAV, but because these quadcopters they have 4 engines, and if they are hit by the SCUAs, probably, especially from the upper part, they may harm the SCUAs. And this occurred essentially because we think because of the density of birds, and probably because of the season. So this lower example here, it's not Fields Peninsula, but it's Sierva Cove in the Antarctic Peninsula, close to the Primavera Argentinian station. So I'll move further, and probably the example which has made us decide to come up with this short presentation was the behavior of the terns. We are not sure, in fact, if these are Antarctic terns or not. We are not biologists, but but this occurred in Barton Peninsula. In fact, this picture is from another area, so it's not this bird. It's another bird, but we think from the same species. We were flying the fixed wing at between 70 to 9 meters above the ground level, and when we were already flying it, we became aware that there was a couple of Arctic. Well, it's written here Arctic. It's another typo. It's Antarctic terns nesting in the overflight area. In fact, it was quite difficult to know in advance that those terns were there, because they were silent, and we didn't see them, so there was no way to see them. This was an area in a plateau without much birds, very few birds. In fact, there was probably a couple of skuas around. But interesting thing came when the UAV flight overflight the nesting site, even though it was maybe 40 to 50 meters above the nesting site, which was in a small hill. The terns took off and followed the UAV for a while. And the main problem was not this one, but it was that they have abandoned the nest, and a skua took the opportunity to try to approach it. So the skua was in the vicinity, and we saw that when the terns left to follow the drone, the skua tried to approach the nest, but fortunately it was a short flight and no problem occurred, and the terns managed to scare the skua away. So we would like to emphasize that it's not the direct way that UAV affects a single bird individual, but essentially also, or maybe also, as other individuals or species will change behavior as a reaction to the first change. So they will be, as you know, well, better than me, skuas are very opportunistic individuals, and they would take the chance to attack the nests. Finally, just some recommendations based on our experience. I think this is you will know about this. Avoid flying during the nesting season, but in fact for many scientific needs it is impossible. Take off and land the furthest away from nesting areas. Flying above 150 200 meters, from our experience, even nesting areas, is probably a good limit. Be especially careful in the flight planning by considering increasing the flight height close to cliffs. Remember the real distance to the cliff face. If flying below 150 200 meters, preferably fly within line of sight and with a colleague following the UAV with binoculars for evaluating interference with birds and possible bird attacks. And finally, just remind you that drone operations are in fact very important significantly. They are a major breakthrough, and they allow to remotely assessing several biophysical elements that, in order to be evaluated, if we were using a classical land-based approach, they would surely cause a much stronger environmental impact than the drones do. Today, with a drone, we can map an area in about 30 minutes, which would take us several days to map with high resolution, using a team of maybe 2 or 3 people, which would have to step in the terrain. So there is lots of balancing that needs to be done. Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity and for the time, and congratulations for the workshop, and we wish you all the best of success. Thanks.